Good morning. I'm just going to jump straight in this morning. We are doing our theme lessons as we do periodically, every first and third Sunday of the month. And our theme this year is It's All About Him. And we're going to spend a little bit of time, as you would imagine, talking about Him. I really appreciated the singing we did last Sunday, where we did spend some time just singing about Him and praising Him and telling stories about Him in song. And we're going to essentially continue that today in our sermon. If you'll go ahead and open your Bibles to Exodus chapter 3. We'll be looking at other passages, but that's where we will be spending most of our time this morning, Exodus chapter 3. God has, through history, had to prove Himself. I know that sounds odd, and we don't normally think about God in those terms, but God created us, but then had to build a relationship with us, and you see that happen as you go through history. Back in the garden, it was fairly easy. He was able to come down in the cool of the day and walk with Adam and Eve and talk with them, and you've just got this beautiful picture of fellowship and communion there between God and His creation. But of course, that gets ruined fairly quickly with Adam and Eve choosing to sin as opposed to follow God. And then you kind of carry along in the story, and you've got this God working to reestablish a relationship with this creation that had walked away from Him. And you've got the calling of Abraham and Abraham's family, his son Isaac and his son Jacob and his son, or many sons. And you get them brought to Egypt, and we come to the story of Moses. When I sat down to think about what I wanted to talk about today, with this concept of God proving Himself worthy, I kept coming back to this story. Because you have what I think is probably a story that mirrors our story in a lot of ways. Moses gets raised up in a family of privilege. That wasn't true of most of God's chosen people. They were slaves in Egypt. While they, I'm sure, had good times as well as many bad times, as a whole, they were a despised and rejected people. But Moses gets raised up in Pharaoh's household. He gets taught and educated the same way the privileged Egyptians would have been taught and educated. And we're told even that he was trained up in all the education of the Egyptian. He gets to be born to privilege. But Moses wants to do God's work. Well, I say that. We make that conjecture based on the story. We've got the story of Moses at about 40 years old. He sees his people being oppressed. He recognizes that it's his people that are the slaves, and he wants to step in and help them. And so when he sees an Egyptian soldier or taskmaster beating a Hebrew, he kills the Egyptian and buries him in the sand. And he goes and confronts the Hebrew people, and they say, "Who are you? Who are you to be chosen to come and rescue us?" And so he gets rejected, and we see the story of him going into hiding. The reason I say that this mirrors our story is because we honestly kind of get raised spiritually the same way. We are born into privilege. We like to say in our family that you have three statuses, spiritually speaking. You are lost, you are saved, and then I like to use the term safe. For those who have rejected God, they're lost. They're in a difficult situation. For those who follow God, they are saved because they've done what is necessary to belong to God. But then there's that group of people, like young people, the children, who are safe. God is not holding their sins against them until they reach what we often call the age of accountability. So there's the safe. That's how we're born. We are born safe in the eyes of God. That's why Jesus could say, become like these little children. But at some point, we decide to get up and do things our own way. Oftentimes, that's not necessarily pursuing bad, it's just pursuing self. And in doing so, we reject God, and we want to go our own way and do things our own way, and we find that life tends to reject us. And it's not until God calls us that we come back. In Moses' story, God appears, and it's an incredible story here in Exodus chapter 3 of the burning bush. He's out there looking for a sheep because he's become a shepherd in Midian, and he sees this bush that's on fire, that's not being consumed, and he marvels at that, and he approaches this bush, and it says in verse 4, God called to him from the bush, Moses, Moses, here am I, he answered. Do not come closer, he said. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. Then he continued, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. And rightly so. We know that God's going to call him and ask him to serve as his servant, going back into Egypt and rescuing his people. And I wonder how much deja vu is happening here, where Moses is like, I already tried that. That was something I tried 40 years ago. Back when I was a young 40-year-old man. I like to call 40-year-olds young because, you know. I was set up. I was in the perfect position to go and rescue the people, and they said no. They rejected me. I wonder how much of this runs through Moses' head. But God's not calling Moses to go rescue the people by his power, by his education, by his talent, or with his resources. God is calling Moses to go back and do what he could not do by his own power, to rescue the people by God's power. And of course, we know the story as it continues. Moses starts asking questions. You know, the first question he asked there in verse 11 is, well, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And I want to look at, he asked 4 questions total. I want to look at them briefly and relate them to our life, because I think the answer that God gives Moses is still the same answer that God would give us today. How often is it that whenever you come across a task or a difficulty of life, that your immediate response is, well, who am I? I'm a nobody. I'm nothing. How in the world can this good thing happen to me? Or how in the world can I do this good thing? Or whatever the task is in front of you. We question our own abilities, ourselves. We question our character. And I love God's answer. He says here, verse 12, I will certainly be with you. And this will be a sign to you that I am the one who sent you. When you bring the people out of Egypt, you will all worship God at this mountain. Now, a couple of things to notice about this answer. One is this. Notice, God doesn't turn around and build Moses up. That's what we expect, because that's what our modern culture says we should do. If you're feeling down about yourself, just think about all the good things about yourself. Think about the ways in which you are talented. Go out there and let people build you up and brag on you and talk about how wonderful you are. Go spend some time doing self-care. Go out there and make yourself feel better. That's what the world tells us to do when we start questioning ourselves. That's not God's answer. God isn't, Moses, you're a brilliant man. Or Moses, you are so talented and educated. Or Moses, you're the kind of person who people like to follow. his answer is not anything about Moses. His answer is me. Moses says, "Who am I?" And God responds with, "Nobody. You're nobody. But I'm somebody." I love that. Because I'll be honest, I think we need to hear that sometimes. We get down and we make life all about me. The truth is, life is all about him. I also love that in this. Have you ever noticed that God says, you know what, the way you'll know that I'm with you is that if you keep on, I'll bring you back here. It's not you can know now. His response is, right now you got to have faith. But the end result will be you will come back and worship me on this mountain. Not you can know today that I am with you. It's that if you will obey today, I will prove that I am with you later. That's not the way we like answers to work, is it? We want to be assured now. God says, have faith now and you'll be assured later. I love that. Because that's the lesson we need to hear sometimes. Now, Moses asked what I think is a logical next question. If I go in there and I tell them God said bring you out, and they say, well, what God? What's his name? What do I tell him? He's essentially asking, who are you? Who are you? And I don't mean who are you in an ugly, defiant, obnoxious kind of way. It's I need to be able to share with them who you are. You got to remember, Moses lives in a land of many gods. He lives in a land where all sorts of different ideas of gods are worshipped by different people in different locations. And he knows that this God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's already recognized that. That's already been discussed earlier. But he's saying, if I go in there to this people and I tell them, a God has spoken to me and told me to deliver you, and they say, which God? What's his name? We need to know who it is we're supposed to be obeying. What do I tell them? What do I tell them? And God's answer here is amazing. It's, I am who I am. It can also be translated, and this is my favored translation here, I am who I intend to be. So you want to give them a name. My name is whatever I want it to be. That's my name. You want to give them some sort of assurance as to who I am. I don't have to define myself to you. I don't have to prove myself to you or to them. I am who I am. And that's enough. How often is it that we need to hear that? How often is it that we are conditionally obedient? We're kind of like Jacob was. Remember Jacob, whenever he's running from his family and he's on the run, Esau wants to kill him. He's out there, he has this dream of the ladder coming from heaven down and angels ascending and descending on the ladder, and God is speaking from on top up from the position of heaven, and God makes the same promises to Jacob that he made to Abraham, that he made to Isaac, and Jacob's response to that is, okay, you know what? If you'll do all of that, then I'll belong to you. You've got to prove yourself to me first. I love that God's answer here is, I'm done with that. I am who I am, take it or leave it. I think sometimes we need to be put in that place. I think sometimes we are. Where life isn't quite what we expected it to be, if not exactly the way we intended for it to go, and we're sitting there going, God, where are you? And God's, I think, responding, I am exactly where I intend to be. I am where I'm supposed to be. Where are you? Who are we to try to put God in his place? Moses' next question. What about them? What if they won't believe? What if they say, God didn't really appear to you? God's not really calling us out. Who are you to come in and say you're going to rescue us by God's hand? What if they don't believe? What if the problem isn't Moses? The problem isn't God. The problem is the people won't follow. They won't believe. They won't do what they're supposed to do. God said, here's some evidence. I'll give you some signs. And he gives them signs. You throw down the staff becomes a snake. You pick it up, it becomes a staff again. Puts his hand in his coat, he pulls it out and it's withered. He puts it back in and it's healed. If need be, he can turn water into blood. And of course, we see that happen as the first of the 10 great plagues that hit Egypt. God gives him evidence. God gives him the resources he needs. And I find it interesting. It's never, well, you just need to argue better, or you need to have more skills, or you need to have what will help you out. God says, I'll give you what you need. I'll take care of the proof, the evidence. I'll handle that side of it. So Moses' response is, well, I'm incapable. I'm slow of tongue. I'm not somebody who can get up and deliver great speeches. They're not going to listen to me. And I love that God's response is, I didn't ask you to be capable. I asked you to be willing. Verse 11, chapter 4. God says, who placed a mouth on human? Who makes a person mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. God's argument to Moses, the same argument he still makes today. It's that he doesn't demand our skills or our talents or our expertise or our wealth or our perfection. And that's not just true with Moses. It's true again and again as you look through Scripture. In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, Paul makes this statement about himself. He says, I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I came to you in weakness, in fear, and in much trembling. My speech and my preaching, they were not with persuasive words, but with demonstrations of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not be based on human wisdom, but on God's power. When Paul later prays or talks about his prayers where he asks for his thorn in the flesh to be removed and that he be made whole again, we like to argue about what the thorn in the flesh is, and we lose the power of what's really being taught there. Paul has some sort of deficiency. It doesn't matter what it is. But his deficiency is what makes the power of God be most seen. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, God's response to his prayer to remove the thorn in the flesh is, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weaknesses. God has not asked us to be strong or powerful or talented or skillful or experienced or wealthy or perfect. God has not demanded that we be what we are incapable of being. God said, I'll display my skill, my talent, my experience, my knowledge, my resources, my perfection. Because the truth is, all God demands of us is willingness. You see, sometimes I think we get so sidetracked from the concept that God is capable, that it's all about him. It's not about us. It's not about us achieving some great thing. It's not about us being better than anybody else. It's not about us being seen as more righteous. It's not about you and me, it's about him. And we make his work about us, about some sort of achievement, about how large our congregation is, about how successful we are being, about how talented we are, about whether we are able or capable, or whether we appeal more to people than other groups, and all these human wisdom things. And I find it interesting that Paul, back in 1 Corinthians, says, you know what? I decided to come to you as a bumbling fool so that your attention would not be on me, but on the message. I am convinced that Paul was not a bumbling fool. You know, we like to say that because he says multiple times in the Corinthian letters that he determined to not come to them with persuasive speech or power of tongue, that Paul must have been a deficient speaker of some sort. Paul was incredibly well educated. You look at the argument and the way that he lays things out in the letters that we have, he was a brilliant man and rather persuasive in the way that he made arguments. But he didn't appeal to that group of people, because he knew it would make them think on the wrong thing. They would put their faith in him, not in the message. I'm going to tell you, I think sometimes we think we have to win people over by our own power and strength, and we lose the truth that the power is in the message, not in us. It's in sharing the message. In Rex's Lord's Supper talk, I'm gonna pay him a compliment, the same compliment I love, which is I went down a rabbit hole. That's always the greatest compliment you can give me. That's what I did with Rex's Lord's Supper talk, because I got to thinking, as he talked about the eagerly waiting for the Lord, and just this great expectation of the good things to come, it got me thinking about what we do during that time. And of course, that's exactly where Rex went with his talk. But it made me think about the illustration of what if somebody told you, you know what, I'm going to pay for you to take your family to Disney World. Great. That sounds awesome, doesn't it? And then they said, I don't know when I'm going to send you yet, but I'll tell you something. I will also pay for every single person you invite to go with you. All of them. I'll pay for it. I don't care how many. I don't care where all they're from. If you invite them to come with you, I will pay for them to get in with you. What would you do? Now, barring how you feel about Disney World, you might hate Disney World, so choose some other great destination place for you and your family if that's the case. But if somebody came to you and said, all expenses paid, I will take care of it if you just tell them to come. What would you do with that message? Would you keep it to yourself? Well, you know, I really don't want it to be overly crowded the day I go. I'm not going to tell anybody. I don't think you would. If you believe the promise, if you believe the guarantee, if you believe that this person was really going to deliver on that big of a promise, my suspicion is you wouldn't just tell somebody, a few people. You would probably go through your friends list and send a message to every single one and say, hey, here's the proof. Here's how you can know this is genuine, this is true. If you'll come, it is paid for. My suspicion is you wouldn't just tell people you were friends with, you would tell people you don't even know. Because if somebody's going to be that generous, you are going to spread the message to any person ever and get as many people in as you can. Hey, brothers and sisters, We have an all-expense-paid trip to the greatest place you could ever possibly imagine. And we've been told, I will even let in anybody ever that you invite. You tell them, if they will believe that I'll actually pay for them to get in, I'll let them in. We've been given that guarantee. We telling people about it? Well, Adam, who am I to go out there and share that message? You're nobody. Just like God told Moses. Or who is this person that's paying for this great trip? The I am who I am. Or what if they won't believe you? Leave that up to them. But who are you to deny them the opportunity with your silence? Or, Adam, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to tell them. I'm incapable. How hard is it to tell somebody you're invited to? It's not a hard message. It's just a message we don't want to share. Brothers and sisters, I'm telling you, if life is all about Him, it is a message you'll share. Because He's eager to bring in people from every corner of this earth. He is unwilling to be prejudiced against anybody. He is offering this invitation to everybody who's willing to show up. So let's tell people about it. Because it's an invitation worth talking about. If you're not a child of God, if you've not believed that invitation, you for whatever reason, you've decided, I'm not ready yet, or maybe I'm not sure that I believe it yet, or maybe it's I believe it, it's just really hard to take that step of faith out there and to make changes in my life. Let me tell you, you're throwing away the greatest opportunity that has ever been offered to anybody. Take it. Come. Go to this great place. Because God is eager to bring you in. If you need the invitation to get your life right, to be baptized into Christ,